I turn the floor over to you to introduce our special guest today.
Thank you. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce any of you who've not yet met her to a former president, Debilyn Molineaux. And she joins us today from, I believe, Washington, D.C., although she's been known to hit the road a lot. So you never know where she'll be calling from. I first met Debilyn when she was, she worked at the Bee for a while on the business side. And, but I really got to know her better when she ran for office, for a city level office. And she was just a really great candidate. And it was wonderful to see a young woman so dynamic running. And so I always paid attention to her, and we stayed in touch after that, and she continued to do really good work in the community. And then she went off adventuring, and the next thing I knew, her heart was broken when our politics began to crumble up. She's a great person to bring folks together to get stuff done. I mean, this is a get stuff done woman. And when our communications, because of politics, began to crumble, and pretty soon people didn't want to talk to each other, and people's feelings are getting hurt, and there is so much hostility, it didn't surprise me to see Debilyn moving into the breach to work for a couple of organizations. One was called Living Room Conversations, and she actually worked some in Fresno, but mostly out of Portland, bringing people together in living rooms who were of different political persuasions and different religious and cultural persuasions, and teaching them how to talk to each other in such a way that they could help understand one another. And her goal was to break down these hard feelings between folks. And she was very successful doing that. And she was also in a group called the Coffee Party that was had similar goals. And now, rushing forward here, she's with the Bridge Alliance. And again, this organization I'm taking from their website now. She can explain it more, but it brings insiders and outsiders to politics. A place where they can meet and talk and about their ideas for repairing our democracy, and make it a place where we can all live and work together happily in everyday life. There's an education fund involved there. She's also co-publisher of something called The Fulcrum, which is actually, I believe, a website that publishes articles, opinion, and original reporting that furthers this idea of country before party, and brings people together to teach us about what's required to have a healthy self-governance. So with that, I'll let her explain it because she can do it a lot better. Welcome, Debilyn.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you. So nice to see so many of my friends from Fresno. I still have my Fresno phone number, which has been with me so long now. It's just part of who I am, if it's not a 559. And right over there, where you guys can't see it off the camera, is my yard sign from when I ran for office in the 2004 election cycle. And
you should have won.
I know, and I'm so glad I didn't have to make all those really painful cuts in the 2008 crash.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a really good start for me to see how our system isn't set up right now to serve the people. It is set up for politics right now is a toxic system. And the influence that we have, the influences on our political system, have helped get us to this point of division. And I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about how bad things are and admiring the problem anymore. I really want to infuse with you all this idea that we can do something about it. And indeed, it's part of the joy of being an American, part of our American duty as citizens to actually do this outreach, to talk with people who are different from ourselves and find ways to connect with them. It doesn't have to start with politics. And in fact, most of the deeper conversations I have with people with whom I disagree politically, we're connected around things like we're dog owners, or we both love to eat. And so there's a food component, or we love being out in nature and hiking. And so there's all these aspects of ourselves that we've forgotten to connect around because political identity has become so central to a lot of people's lives. Maybe not yours, and I hope not, because it's not a healthy place to be. I put a few links in the chat, just as Gail was regaling like all the things that I have worked on in the last 20 years now. Living room conversations that Gail led with is something that was started in 2009. And I remember sitting in a friend's driveway in 2009 and getting the phone call from this woman named Joan Blades. And she was like, I really don't understand why people aren't more concerned about climate change. And I want to develop this program where people can talk about any issue that they care about to really get a different perspective on what that is. And so we formed this group, Living Room Conversations, and developed, there's over 100 conversation guides now, where if you have a topic that you want to talk about, you can invite some friends. Carolyn actually hosted one of our pilot projects in her living room back in 2010, I think it was, where we just sat around and talked about the topic at hand and got to know each other a lot better. Living room conversations and their guides have been used in company settings, in business settings. They've been used in church settings to help people deepen their relationships with each other, but in such a way that it's not confrontational. One of the reasons that we end up, talking with people who believe the same as us is because we're afraid we're going to get in a fight and people aren't going to like us anymore, or we're going to get mad. And so, one of the things to do about that is really to download one of the living room conversation guides or follow along on the screen and practice what it is to ask an open-ended question without an agenda. No gotcha questions. Those aren't allowed. Those are bad. But my favorite question, I think, in living room conversations is in the get to know each other round, where I always answer the question. You get to choose which question you want to answer. So it's even a little safer that way. My favorite question to answer is, what sense of purpose, duty, or mission guides your life? And I have had the most wonderful responses that people will share with me, like, what is their reason for getting out of bed in the morning? And we don't talk about things like that in most conversations. And it really just opens up this space where we can share with each other what we really deeply care about. And it's often our nation, and it's our communities, and it's our neighbors, and it's our family. And we forget that in the political infighting that goes on. So I offer that to you as just a tool. And then if you don't want to host your own conversation yet, but maybe you want to go to something that somebody else is hosting with people you don't know because it's a lower social risk, there's an event coming up next month on June 12th called America Talks. And America Talks is modeled after something that they did in Europe, where they had Europe Talks, and they had 100,000 people across Europe participate. We're a little bit more modest I'm getting the URL on the other screen. We're a little bit more modest in what we're anticipating for this first year of America Talks, and that we're trying to get 10,000 people to participate from across the nation. And there's one of the things that happened with Europe Talks is they got to develop this technology that will let you register and you sign up, and you answer 5 or 6 questions that kind of give them an orientation of what your belief systems are. And then they match you with somebody that shares some of those beliefs, but not all of them. So there's some similarities and some differences. And at the appointed time, which is on June 12th, I think it's noon Eastern, you go on, they're going to have a little program. It's a pre-recorded program, and then they're going to invite people to stay on. And if you stay on the call, you're going to get matched with one other person that you don't know from somewhere else in the nation. And on the screen will be questions to answer and respond to with your partner. And it's a really cool way to practice with like no risk other than your time to see how to have these conversations across political differences and cultural differences. And I hope that you all will sign up and participate and play along, because I think it's going to be really fun. I'm going to be doing a preview on Monday, and there's a couple of former members of Congress that have been recruited and are going to be participating in the pool. So you could get matched with a former member of Congress. There's a couple of celebrities, but I haven't heard if they're confirmed yet or not. And that's what we have going on. I'm going to pause now because I feel like I'm talking at you, and just see if there's any questions.
Hey, Debbie, this is Sue. I have a question.
Sure.
Is this, is it written conversation or just auditory, or is there a face-to-face?
So for both of these are in-person conversations. And so on America Talks, what happens is on the screen in front of you, you'll have just like with Zoom, it's not a Zoom call, but it's like Zoom. And so you'll see the person you're talking to, and then off on the right-hand side, there will be questions. And so you're responding to the questions while you're talking to the person.
Oh, good. I like to see people I talk to.
Exactly. So thanks for clarifying. And then for living room conversations, it's an either in-person or a Zoom process. And again, it's the same thing. Like you read the questions and then you talk to the people.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Any more questions at this point? Oh, Gail unmute. There you go.
Okay. I just had a little question to have what's happened to you during the pandemic? Has it affected what you've been trying to do? Have people become more together or more apart during the pandemic? What are you discovering?
It's mixed. I think it's, so for the work of people who are having the conversations, the people having and wanting these types of barrier breaking or different, crossing differences, bridging differences conversations has exploded. It was one of those mixed blessings, right? Everybody, because they were so disheartened and lonely, and people started moving on Zoom, it actually allowed more people to participate than if we had been limited to in-person events.
Mm-hmm.
And so because the whole culture moved online and onto Zoom calls, there has been an explosion of people participating in these types of events. And thankfully, funding has followed. If we can show that we can scale this and have our 10,000 people for America Talks, and hopefully way more than that. But if we can do that, then we can show that there's an appetite in culture for this, and more funding will follow, and we can do more of it, and then set up a virtuous cycle. And right now we have a very toxic cycle that is very well funded and benefits very few people. And so we are kind of the antidote. We're putting in place the antidote to help people have the healthy behaviors, the healthy interactions, the sense of belonging and bonding with each other that will get us into that virtuous cycle.
Hi, I'm Brooke Frost, and I have two questions. One is, this is minor, but I went to the America Talks, and at the bottom, it has a poll question about, do you support Biden's work so far? Why is that there? That is very off-putting for me, making it less likely that I feel comfortable that this is an unbiased space. So that's one question.
Mhm.
And then the second question is, do any of your living room conversation guides talk about how to talk with family members or friends that are already invested so heavily on the opposite end of the spectrum that you cannot have a decent conversation?
Yes and yes. So at the bottom of America Talks, I mentioned that they ask 5 or 6 questions to help identify people who are similar and people who are different. That is one of the questions that gets asked. So if you go to sign up, it's not about trying to sort out Biden supporters and Trump supporters. It's really about trying to find people who have some similarities and some differences. And that's simply one of the questions.
Okay, because it looks like it's right at the bottom before you're
I
answering
will
any of the
mention that. I will
questions.
mention that to the
Yeah.
team who put that together and let them know that it's a put off.
Yeah,
It's
was
off-putting
for
for some
me.
folks.
Yeah.
And by the way, nobody ever gets to see the answers to those questions. It's strictly for the matching tool. Living Room Conversations has a friends and family guide, and I'm going to pull it up real quick. They call it a friends and family tip sheet. It was initially, I remember helping create this guide. It was so funny because it was like everybody was worried about like getting together for Thanksgiving. So it started out as a holiday guide, and then it turned into just a tip sheet. The biggest tip on there, though, is knowing when to not have the conversation, especially about politics. And one of the things that makes family makes it harder to have conversations, is that there's not the kind of social decorum of boundaries that most people hold when they're talking with friends or colleagues or people they don't know as well. So when you're talking with people that you're intimate with, that sense of boundaries falls away, and so it's just easier to be triggered or to trigger them. And so a lot of it is like keeping in mind. I always hold, when I'm talking with my friends and family who are politically different from me, I try to, number one, amp up my verbalization of respect for them and their viewpoint and how smart they are. I also try to increase my curiosity quotient. Because if I'm curious about, like, I know they have a really good reason for believing something different than me. I just don't know what that is, and I want to know why. And then I also have to drop my expectation that they're going to have any questions for me in return. Because I often find that people who are very dogmatic in their beliefs really don't have curiosity to return to me. And that has to be okay. It literally has to be okay. And I've spent most of 20 years now learning how to not be triggered in those conversations. And I still get tripped up. So it's not like you just figure it out and you have it forever. It's like an ongoing practice, like, exercise and yoga and eating healthy. But our country's worth it, right? Like if we don't do this, our country is going to fall into something that we don't want to live through. Other questions?
Debilyn, hi, Poonam here. Hi, I absolutely love the concept of this initiative, and it kind of reminded me of the Human Library, which also looked at challenging gender stereotypes, stigmas,
Mhm.
disabilities, etc. So I think this is a really nice initiative. I think the concept there was a little bit about, one person being like a book, and, people having that kind of a very personal conversation without judging the other person. So I think this is really nice. It's a very nice initiative.
Thank you. And that's called the Human Library?
Yes, I can
Okay.
share the link with you on
Thank
the
you.
chat.
Appreciate that.
I'm so glad Poonam brought that up, because I just read an article about that while I was in Europe, and people volunteer to be books and be in the library, and they could be mentally ill, they could be homeless, they could be refugees, they could be from some other culture or trans or anything. And then people choose to check out that person and they sit across from each other in the library and they just hear that person's story. And I think it's brilliant.
Mm,
It's a brilliant idea.
I love that. I'll have to connect in with whoever organized it.
Yeah, it's exists in close to 80 countries, and the US is one of the countries where it's also has a presence. I'm sharing the link. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Poonam. Yeah, there's, I know that both. So what I haven't mentioned is this other event that's going to happen after America Talks. So America Talks is June 12th. There's a catch up on June 13th for people who missed the main event. And then June 14th through the 20th is the National Week of Conversation, and it's the 4th annual National Week of Conversation. This one's near and dear to my heart because I helped start it. And we modeled it after Giving Tuesday because we had a whole lot of experts out there who knew how to facilitate these types of conversations. But we didn't have like a demand in the public. Like it wasn't like people were saying, 5 years ago, I want to learn how to have conversations. But we started it anyway because there was a strong academic bend, if you will, towards like this could be helpful for what we see coming in our culture with the toxic polarization. And so the National Week of Conversations is where you take your practice that you do during America Talks on the 12th and 13th, and you host your own event. So you do it on Zoom, you can do it in your living room, but it's where you bring your friends and family in and you build a practice group together. So I just want to like highlight that as well. And there are links, I think, from America Talks to National Week of Conversation. And really practical questions. Thank you for asking that, Brooke, too, about friends and family, because that's a whole other challenge.
Any other questions out there? Jump in. Nothing.
Yeah, I have another one. Can you give us some more examples of the kind of questions that are put out there as conversation topics?
Sure. So let me go to, so what I'm going to, can I do a screen share real quick?
Yeah, let me give you permission.
Thank you.
Sure.
And then can you also talk about what happens when somebody gets agitated or starts getting angry during the conversation?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have tips for that too. All right. Let's see if
Yeah, I think you've got permission to share.
it says that you've disabled screen sharing.
Oh,
So the part of what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to just the topics list for living room conversations, and then Sue, I'm going to have you pick one that looks interesting to you, and we'll go see what the questions are.
okay, go ahead and try again, Debilyn.
Okay. Yeah. So I just wanted to like give you like a real something that you actually care about here. So can you see my screen now?
I
Yes.
can.
Okay, great. So we've got, I said there's hundreds. And so if there's anything that you see in here that you are interested in.
How about, does my vote really matter?
Does my vote really matter? There we go. So the way these are structured is that there's a little introduction paragraph to kind of set the context. And we invite people when they host conversations to actually read this out loud so that everybody has the same context in which the conversation is going to take place. And then it gives you, if there's background information, like this was created in partnership with the Campus Engagement Project. And then you get started. And so everybody has a minute to introduce themselves and tell a little bit about why you're here. And then you go through the conversation agreements. These are the agreements that family rarely keeps. And why family is a little bit more challenging, but be curious and listen to understand. First one, show respect and suspend judgment. Make sure to pay attention to common ground. We tend as humans to focus strictly on our differences. We ask for authenticity, be purposeful and to the point. So don't go down a rabbit trail on a different topic unless the whole group decides to go down that rabbit trail together. And own and guide the conversation. So there's no facilitator in this format. Everybody is is responsible for their contribution and for helping others stay on track. If you click here, it will go to the tips for if somebody gets agitated of what to do. And I'm going to skip that and come back to it in a minute, Sue.
Okay.
Round 1 here this is my, what sense of purpose, mission, or duty guides you in your life? But what are your hopes and concerns for your community? What would your best friend say about you? And this is really just to invite that sense of openness in the conversation. And it's a little bit vulnerable. And when people get vulnerable, other people feel safe. It's a really crazy thing that happens. And then these are the questions that you actually asked about. So I did a little bit of a lead up because, you want to know, like, what led to your decision to register to vote or not? How important was voting in your family? And I think, I'm going to shut up here for a second, Sue, and just let you look at these. But if you can see how these are not questions that cause a fight, these are questions to really like have people reflect on and share their stories. And is there a question in there that you would like to answer?
Oh, so that would be what you would be asking in the group. So
Yes, absolutely. Like,
so it wouldn't be that each person would try and answer all 5 of those questions. They
No.
would just say, no, well, I'd like to talk about how important was voting in your family.
Right. Right. And so everybody gets to pick which question they answer. They get to answer the question without interruption or crosstalk. And nobody has, you don't have a discussion, if you will, until after everybody has shared. And then round 3 is really kind of like reflecting on what you heard. And so again, you take 2 minutes to answer one of the following questions. So the reflection then for the group is just about like, what did you learn? And how did that inform like how is that going to inform you going forward? And then usually what we found, and Carolyn, you can attest to this before I go out of this, people, because they feel safe and heard and bonded and they feel like they belong in the group, they typically don't leave for another hour after the conversation ends. So
Wow.
we tell people like plan at least an hour, an hour and a half is better. And then, people are going to want to stick around.
And socialize.
Yeah, and socialize. And
Any participants, Debilyn? I mean, is it just entirely up to your hostess or the person that's putting this conversation together? So how many participants? I mean, are you safer with less? Should you have more?
We designed this to be 6 people.
Thank you.
You can do more, you can do fewer, you can do more, but you need to allow 10 to 15 minutes per person for talking. So that's the
Have you found that when people come to these sessions that they're pretty good at kind of following the guidelines?
Yeah, because of how you get into the conversation, because you start with this context setting and then you go through and you read the conversation agreements together. When Carolyn and I did it, we actually read them out loud. We took turns, everybody read one. 6 people, 6 agreements. And so you're making a pact with each other as you go into the conversation to follow the agreements. And if you want, so this was the take responsibility. I'm looking for where they moved the tips to, Sue, to get back to your other question. Let me see if there's so yeah, they have, as deep as you want to go, you can go to it. But generally speaking, what we used to say was just to like remind people of the conversation agreements. If they're getting too agitated, ask them if they want to suspend the conversation, or if they're not feeling heard, what is it that you're not getting? This is where curiosity comes in really for me a lot. I often can help de-escalate situations just by shutting up and listening and really hearing and asking, questions that are touching on the emotion or the anger. And that takes practice because I have to be willing to sit there in the fire sometimes,
So
but
like these conversations for America Talks, is there one person in each group that has experience doing this? I mean, that sounds pretty complicated to me.
So and so I want to like let you know, like in the thousands, tens of thousands of living room conversations, we've had maybe 5 reports of people getting agitated in the midst of the conversation.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so it's like this big. It's not like it can't happen, but it's this big. When Carolyn helped us with the pilot project, we had somebody who went off on a tangent and started getting really agitated, not about what our topic was, but about a different topic. And so somebody in the group was like, okay, come on back. We need to talk about what we're here to talk about. And that was it. It was over.
Oh, good.
And it was like, conversation.
So it's not even one person that has to take that role.
No. That's why I said it's not facilitated. It's the whole group agrees to be responsible together. And now the America Talks, I want to make one real distinction here. The America Talks program is a one-on-one through video chat. It's not a living room conversation.
Okay.
Living room conversation is a tool if you wanted to host your own later. Just to.
And the America Talks, you're talking with a pair. You're talking with whoever you're paired up with.
Exactly. Hi, Sandra.
Hi, and call me Sandy. I need to change that label on this. Is this used with pre-college age, college age students also? Is there some way that you've managed to roll this out as a tool for young people?
Yes, there's a whole other program. I hesitate to give you like all the names and the wonky.
No, that's okay. I don't need the details, but
yeah, but there's a whole other program that that combines civic education with living room conversations, because we need both to know like how our government is structured. At the same time, we need to have the ability to talk with each other.
Because in Fresno, and you're probably aware of this, I don't know if you recognize the name John Minkler.
Yes.
And then, of course, at Fresno State, the Ethics Center and some of the work that's being done there for particularly with young people. And their work seems to me to tie into what you're doing. I just wondered if they have if they're familiar with what you're up to.
When I was still in Fresno, I remember talking with, not with John Minkler, but with, I can picture his name, and I think it's another John at Fresno State. He used to do a TV show, John Kepler, perhaps? Kepler, Jackie's giving me the heads up, yeah.
Capitman is head of the Research Policy Institute.
Yes, that was it. He was aware of it at one time. I'm not sure if anybody else at Fresno State is.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Again, and that was a long time ago. Gail, are you talking to us?
Unmute.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
I have a question about just in your personal experience, what has been like your most outrageous or your most exciting meeting and your least appreciated meeting? Your most favorite or least favorite meetings that you've had in here, and what happened? What are your cocktail party stories?
From living room conversations specifically, I need something a little narrower than like my whole.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, let's bring it current to your current work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my current work is with Bridge Alliance, and where we have about 100 organizational members who work on a variety of areas to strengthen democracy. I left Living Room Conversations about 3 years ago.
Mhm.
And so I still am a proponent. I give them money. I still talk to Joan every other week. But Bridge Alliance, with our 100 members, we're seeking to build both a network of democracy strengthening work in the nation to help people collaborate better at an organizational level, to then amplify the work that they're doing so that people like you hear about the strengthening of democracy work that's happening everywhere in the nation, and to scale both the narrative of the efforts that it's going to take, because it's going to take all of us to provide people with a way to plug in. And that's kind of where my current work is focused with Bridge Alliance. The Fulcrum is a media platform. So we're taking the journalism that is about electoral reform and the wonky stuff of how we run elections in our nation. And we're going to try and we're wrapping content around that, of connecting these wonky election issues to issues that people care about more. Because, you know, they're interconnected, but if we don't take care of the way we run our elections and the way that people get on the ballot and all of that, it's another path, if you will, out of the toxic mess we're in politically. So for stories about like the best and the worst, I don't hold on to them in that, like, there's streams of thought right now, but I don't hold on to like specific moments.
Like here you have all these professional people. Do they still get in the weeds with the basics? I mean,
Okay.
do you still have to sometimes bring them together?
Yeah. There is, well, I used to joke around that my title should be professional cat herder. And so I will say that, like, one of the biggest challenges that we still run into is that there's not much humility in the work that we do. There's getting to be more and more of it, but a lot of times, you know, I'll get phone calls from people that just found the Bridge Alliance, and they'll be like, "Hey, I just found you. I have this great idea that's going to save democracy." And they sit there and then they try to pitch me on this best idea that they just woke up with 2 weeks ago. And I love the energy and the enthusiasm. And so one of the new questions I'm starting to ask people is, what is your story of awakening? Like, what did it take for you to realize that our nation was in trouble and decide to take action?
Good
Because
one.
that kind of cuts through like a lot of the ego stuff that's going on, right to like the core.
The right fighters.
Yeah.
Any more questions out there, comments for Debilyn? This has been really something. I can't wait to go out and look at some of these websites, actually. Are there tips on every one of those categories or the questions? Like, you've got family and friends, so are there going to be tips for some of these other things as well then on how to?
So the family and friends one, actually, Sue, the family and friends tips might answer your question about what to do when people get agitated. But each one of that kind of list of conversation guides that I shared with you,
yes,
there's a formula to it. I don't want to be really open. You can also create your own conversation guide, but the conversation agreements are always the same. The first round of questions that kind of sets the tone for the group and asks people to share something really personal is the same. The third round of questions where you're reflecting are the same. What changes in all of those different topics are the questions asked in round 2. And so those are the topic specific questions that allow people to kind of get past the political talking points or the things that they've thought of for years and never reconsidered, and get down to, like, what's your story about this? Like, why do you really believe this? And what was your experience? And that all happens in round 2. So every conversation guide has different round 2 questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else from anyone this afternoon? Well, Debilyn, I really appreciate you coming and speaking with us. This has been a really great program, and I got a lot out of it. I'm not sure I'm ready to get into conversations with people yet, but hey, you never know. It's a scary place, I must say, you know, and even on Facebook, I try to stay away from that stuff because it's just safer that way. So.
Well, you all are most welcome. Thank you for asking some really good questions. I just put my personal email in the chat. So if you have questions for me offline, feel free to send it to my personal email.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Welcome.
much. Nothing else from anybody else? All right, then we're going to go ahead, and Debilyn, you're welcome to stay if you'd like while we can conclude the rest of the business for today, or you're welcome to go. Thank you again so much. It was a pleasure to have you, and do come visit again. We link up all the time.